What's up guys, we're back in today with another video. In the last video of our transmission build series, we got a lot of good progress done on this thing. It's starting to look like a real transmission. I'm happy with how it's coming together. Hopefully today we can get it done and get it ready to start putting in the car. If we come over to the table, we got a whole bunch of new parts. Starting over here, we have all of our leftover pieces from our rebuild kit that we need to get in. Moving back here, we have our tail housing. We need to replace the seal and the bushing inside. We have two new ones right there. Install this on the car. Then underneath I have my new polyurethane mount. We'll get all that done. Moving up here, we have our new locking dipstick and our mount. Because we are using the 400 behind an LS, you can't mount it the traditional way. So we'll use this bracket. It'll mount to the back of the head and we should be good to go there. Back here, we have our Rife sensor kit. This should take care of all of our sensor needs for everything we're going to do, so we're good to go there. Got a couple fittings right there. Moving over, we have our deep pan kit. Inside we have our filter and hardware. I'm not going to be using this quart gasket. I'm going to be using the one that came in the rebuild kit right here. Moving on over, we have our catch can for the transmission. This is the ATI one. And we have our Motion Raceworks remote drain kit. So there's that. We have this little fitting right here. These are going to go onto this. This is going to mount to the front of the pan right here. It's a little hard to drain it with it being under the car, so we use this kit, wire it somewhere else, and then we can drain it from a remote location. So we got all that. And then lastly, we have our Jake's or Extreme Performance Tree Killer manual valve body. So there's that. We got all of our hardware, solenoid, everything there. So we should be pretty good to go. So let's go ahead and get started on it. Alright, we're going to start with our rear low band servo. Now, reading the instructions, they say that they sometimes ship these kits with two different types of springs depending on the application. There's a big spring and a small spring. I have the big spring style, so we're going to do it that way. What we're going to do is, here's how it comes if you take it straight out of the car. We're going to remove our spring here. We're going to remove the inner piston, and we're not going to be using either of these. I am going to clean this up a little bit. I'm going to pull this seal off, check it. I'll probably replace it, but we are going to run this seal. Then I'll just drop the big spring in there, and we go ahead and install it in the transmission just like this. Now that we have our seal replaced, we can go ahead and install our outer piston and spring. So we're just going to drop it down in there. Right there. Next we need to install our gasket. If you'll notice, I have my two 5/16 alignment bolts that we used for the oil pump in the last video. I have them in there. I just think it helps keep everything in place a little nicer. We need to install our gasket. Now if you look at this gasket, we'll have this little notch right there. Also on the outside, all these edges right there are straight. However, this one has this little bite taken out of it. This needs to go over there, and we need to line up this little notch right there with that. So we're going to drop it down on just like that. We can then drop our cover down into place. Same thing with that little notch lining up with that. Just like that. We'll then press down on it and install all of our bolts. Now that we have all the bolts snugged down, I'm going to go ahead and torque them down to 15 foot-pounds. Next, if you were building a stock transmission, you would typically install your intermediate servo. However, because we are using the trans brake, we will not be installing it. Now, before we get too far into installing the valve body, they tell you in the instructions to bolt this solenoid on, tighten it down, and check to make sure the bolts aren't protruding through on the back side. So we're good to go there. I'm going to go ahead, take this solenoid back off, because there's a bolt that we need to go underneath of this. So this can't be in the way when we're tightening the valve body itself down. So I'll take this off, and then we should be ready to start installing the valve body onto the case. Okay, I went ahead and put our 2 alignment studs back in once again. This valve body does not use gaskets, so you want to make sure that this face is nice and flat and stoned. Make sure there's no nicks sticking up anywhere or anything. We're good to go there, so we're going to go ahead and install our separator plate. So we're just dropping on over the alignment studs, right into place just like that. We can now go ahead and install our valve body. There is a nylon check ball that needs to be dropped in right there. I've already dropped it in, and I put a bunch of grease in there, that way it shouldn't fall out as we're dropping it in. The manual valve is in place. So now we can flip it over, line it up with our 2 studs. And drop it into place, making sure our valve is lined up with our gear shifter right there, so we're good to go. Now we can go ahead and drop the bolts in. There's about 5 different types of bolts that need to be dropped in here. I'll add a picture from the instructions right here. But there's 2 different thread diameters and about 5 different lengths. So we want to make sure we put them all in the right spot. The 5/16, there's 2 different lengths, and there's a button head that goes right here. Like I said, your solenoid sits over top of it, so it needs to sit down in there. And there's 2 lengths for the 5/16, and then there's a couple quarter 20 holes in here, and there's 2 different lengths for those. So I'm going to go ahead and get all the bolts put into the right spot, and then we'll come back. I've installed the valve body. I've also installed the tensioner for the gear. So we're good there. The 5/16 bolts get torqued down to 200 inch-pounds, and the quarter-inch bolts get torqued down to 100 inch-pounds. So now that that's all good, we can go ahead and set our solenoid on. It's going to go on just like this. We have 2 wires. We have our wire that goes to our connector, and we have our ground wire. The ground wire we're just going to run on one of these bolts right here, just like that, or one of them, whichever one's the most out of the way. So we'll run the bolt through the ground wire, run it in, thread it down, torque all 4 of these down to 100 inch-pounds, and we'll be good to go there. Now we have our solenoid on and bolted down. You can see I ran my ground right there. Jake's actually says do not cut these wires. They said if they're too long, just wrap them around your finger, pigtail them to shorten them up, so that's what I did. Got it running right there. And we have our power running over to our connector. We're good to go there. So now we can move on to the modulator valve. Now for the modulator on this kit, you can put the stock one back in, or this kit comes with a plug kit. So we're going to use the plug kit. We're going to take this rod right here, just push it in, just like that. And then we'll put this little cap in with this side going in, just like this. And then we'll just take our little strap and our bolt, put it on there just like that. The last thing we need to do for our valve body kit, it does come with an extended stand for our filter. We'll screw it in right there. Tighten that down. And then we need to put our filter tube in. So I have it right here. I did a double O-ring on top. So we'll just drop it into place just like this. Now if that's done, we can go ahead and drop our filter on top. And I am going to use a washer on here to go underneath the bolt, just like that. Next, we can go ahead and set our pan on. However, we're not going to fully install it yet, just because we still need to drill and tap a hole in the side of it for our oil temp sensor. So I'm going to put the pan on, we'll run a couple bolts in, snug them up, mock everything up, and we'll figure out where we want to put that sensor. Alright, I've got the pan set on here. I just have a couple alignment studs holding it in place, and we need to figure out where we're going to drill for our temp sensor on our pan. So on this setup, I'm going to be running the Rife sensor block. So Rife is Motion Raceworks' sister company. It's their sensor company. So how this works is we have our bracket right here, and we have our sensor block on top. You can see I just have everything mocked up. Nothing's really tightened down or anything. But this is the dual sensor block. So we have two sensors right here. They also make a 3 and a 4 for if you're running like a lockup style transmission or something like that. I just need the 2. So we're going to run our line pressure and our converter charge pressure off of these two right here. And then also it has 2 M5 ports up here. So we're going to be running our temp sensor off of that M5 port. So this block is isolated, so you don't have to worry about vibration killing your sensors and all of that. Also, everything gets wired off one Deutsch connector right here. That way you don't have wires going everywhere. It's a nice clean option, and it's really not that much more money to do it this way than it is to run all your individual sensors. So it's going to sit right here. So we'll set it in place. And this bracket is slotted so you can adjust it up and down a little bit. My transmission stands in the way right now, so I don't have much movement. But it'll sit on there just like this. We'll have our 2 bolts in there. And we need to figure out where we're going to drill and tap for this sensor. I think for me, I'm going to go ahead and put it right back here. Just like this. I could do it up here, but it kind of seems like it's in the way. I'm just going to do it back here, I think. Yeah, that's how I'm going to do it. So what I'll do, I'll go ahead and pull this pan off. I need to drill and tap an 1/8 inch NPT hole right here. So I'll go ahead and do that, and then we can come back over, grab our gasket, put our pan back on for good, and we should be good to start tightening our bolts down. Alright, we got our sensor in there and good to go. So now we can go ahead and set the pan on. I've already put the gasket on. So we'll just set it down on there. Now I'm going to go ahead and put a couple bolts in. We got a lot of extracurricular activities going on around these bolt holes, and I'll show you what I mean by that after I get a couple of them in. Alright, so we've got most of our bolts in around the pan. However, you see there's a couple missing. That's because we have 3 things we need to mount to the bottom of this oil pan. Number 1 being our sensor block. So we're going to put it right there. Get our 2 bolts in. Moving over to this side, we need to install this bracket for our operator shifter. So this side has these little bosses. They're going to sit right in there just like this. And it comes with 2 longer bolts. So we'll get those in. Alright, so we're good to go there. Our shifter cable will go through here, and our shifter will connect. Obviously, this is the wrong one, and I know it's mounted on the wrong direction. I just had it sitting around, so I threw it on so I could manipulate the gears. There is a different one that comes with the shifter that we'll be replacing this with. I just have it on there for now. So disregard this. But this is good. Now we can move on to our last piece. So we need to bolt onto the bottom of the pan. The last thing that we need to install is our ATI catch can. It's going to mount right up here on the front. So we're going to set that on there and then put our bolts in. Now this didn't come with longer bolts. I ended up having to go buy a couple. So I bought these 1¼ 5/16 socket head bolts to put in there. However, it did not come with them, so you do need to buy those separately if you're running this. So we'll get our bolts down in there. Now that we have our 2 brackets and our catch can on, we can go ahead and torque all these bolts down. We still have more things we need to do with these 3 pieces, but we'll come back to them later. For now, I just want to get the pan on. We're going to go ahead and do the tail housing, the governor, and all that next. Then we'll come back to these later. Next, we're going to move on to our tail housing. We need to knock out this rear seal and the bushing down inside and replace it with the new bushing and the new seal on the back side. So I'll go ahead and knock these 2 out. It's the same thing as on the pump. We'll get a screwdriver in here, tap this out, then press the bushing straight out, and we'll get our new ones put in and we'll come back. Alright, I got the tail housing on. I changed out the rear seal and the bushing inside, set it down on there. I just got 2 bolts holding it in place right now. I forgot I actually broke a couple of these bolts off when I was taking it apart. So I got new bolts ordered, they're coming, no big deal. We just got 2 in it to hold everything in place for right now. Good to go there. And then I went ahead and put the transmission mount on right there. Pretty simple. 2 bolts in the back. You got a plate in your mount. Tighten everything down, good to go. So now that we have the tail housing on and good to go, we go ahead and move on to our governor plate and our speedometer. Here we have the hole for our governor. Normally we would put the governor in, and it looks like just like that. You go in there, and then you put your cover on over top. Because we're running the manual valve body, we're not going to be using the governor. So what you can do is you can take your plate, normally it comes on like this, and you can just flip it over, put it in like that. I ordered a cover plate, a nice pretty one to go on here. It's going to be here in a couple days. I'll just bolt it on whenever it gets here. Same thing, just put your seal on, 4 bolts, tighten it down, good to go. But we are not running the governor, so we're good there. We're going to go ahead and move on to the other side. Alright, now on this side, we're going to put our speedometer gear in right here. So here it is. We have our housing and the little plastic gear that goes in it. I've already replaced both the seals on the housing, put the gear in. I put a little bit of assembly lube on the gear and the seal just to help us go in. If you'll notice on this side we have these little cutouts right here. That is for our clamp, is going to help keep it in place, and our clamp bolts right here. So we're going to install it like this for these clamps. So we'll just put it in there about like that, and we'll just pop it into place. Then we'll just take our clamp and our bolt and tighten it down. Alright, next I want to hook up and talk a little bit about this catch can right here. So we see we have our 1/4 inch push connect fitting right here. We're going to connect it to this fitting. This fitting is the very first thing we ever did on this transmission back in part 1 when we drilled and tapped it out. So we're just going to plug it in right there, and we're good to go. Simple. So it's going to come out of here and go into our catch can. Now when I bought this catch can, it did not have this push connect fitting right here on it. It had this little drain valve on there, so that was screwed in just like this. Basically you turn it and everything will come out whenever you need to drain it. The problem with that being, this thing's way under the car, and if I need to empty it, I don't want to have to crawl under the car, open this valve up. This valve's pretty tight too. So instead of doing this, what I'm going to do is run the Motion Raceworks remote drain kit. So this will work on this catch can, or it'll also work with our catch can for our engine that we're going to be installing in the future. So what it is, basically, I've switched this out to a push to connect fitting. You can see it swivels so we can put it wherever we need to go. And then the kit comes with all of our line we need, so we can run this pretty much anywhere. And then on the end, we have this pretty sweet setup right here. So we have a bracket, we can mount it in the engine bay or underneath the car somewhere if we want, or wherever. I'm not exactly sure where I'm going to mount it yet, but we'll mount it somewhere where it's nice and easy to get to, and we'll use this bolt to hold it in place. So we have a push connect fitting on this side. This bracket is held on by 2 C-clips on this part right here, and then on the bottom we have this little twist drain. So all you do is just loosen the valve, your fluid will come out, tighten it back up whenever you're done, and you're good to go. So basically we're going to have a push to connect, we're going to run our line to wherever we want. Whenever we get it in the car, we'll connect this to the other end of the line, mount it up somewhere nice and easy to get to, and it should be a lot easier to drain it than having to crawl up under the car and loosen up that little valve right there. So we're good to go. Let's go ahead and move on to our cooler lines and our sensor lines. Alright, I went ahead and put the transmission flat on a lift cart. That'll make it a little bit easier to do what we're going to do from here on out. So you can see I've already reconnected the temp sensor back to our sensor block, so it runs nice and clean through the bracket down here back over to the sensor. I'm happy with that. Next we need to figure out our cooler lines, because we need to run an adapter off the cooler line to our sensor block. So these threads right here are a 1/4 inch NPS. So it's pipe thread, but they're straight threads. So our oil cooler, we're going to be running -6 AN lines. So we need to put these adapters in there. There's the part number right there. These are 1/4 inch NPS to 6AN fittings. So we'll go ahead and put those in, and then we can start working on our adapters and hoses for that. Alright, now that we have our 2 fittings in for our oil coolers, we can go ahead and move on to running our sensor lines right here. So these are both 300 PSI pressure sensors, so it doesn't matter which one you run to each. You can change these out for a higher PSI if you need to. I'm good with the 300. So you can run either one, it doesn't really matter. However, the one thing, this does come with this little sticker sheet right here, so you can label them, because you need to know which one's which for whenever you run your wiring. So for me, I'm going to go ahead and run the converter pressure on the right side and the line pressure on the left side. It just works out better that way for me. So I got my little stickers up top labeling which one's which. We're going to start off by doing the converter pressure. We're going to run the converter pressure off of our output cooler line right here. And different guys will run these sensors different types of ways. This is just how I'm going to do mine. So obviously we can't run it directly from there to there because this needs to go to our oil cooler. So what we're going to do is I have this fitting right here. There's the part number. It is a 6AN male to 6AN female, but if you'll notice, there's that little hole right there in the middle. This is an 1/8 inch NPT hole. So then we can screw in our fitting right here. There's the part number. This is 1/8 inch NPT to -3AN line. So we'll put that in the hole, and then we can run our 3AN line to the sensor right here with our line right here. There's a part number for that. Now one thing, these lines do come with the fittings already assembled. They're crimped on, so you do need to know what size length you need. I'm going to be running the 14 inch for the converter pressure. So we'll have this fitting, this 1/8 inch NPT fitting that goes into our 3AN line, and then we'll run the 3AN line to the sensor. So I'll go ahead and pull all this out, install it, show you what it looks like, and then we'll go from there. Alright, and there's what it looks like. As you can see, we have that 6AN male to female right there. We have our 1/8 inch NPT coming off of it, and then our line runs around behind the sensor block, around it, and then 90s up into our sensor right there. And then we'll be able to connect our oil cooler just right here with our 6AN line, so we're good to go there. Now we can move on to our line pressure. We're going to run it off of this one. So I'm going to use a 24 inch hose for it. There's the part number. So I'll go ahead and install this, and I'll show you where it's going to run to. So moving over to the driver's side of our transmission, you'll notice there's a hole right here. This is also 1/8 inch NPT, so we're going to run another fitting right here. This time though, I'm going to be using this 90-degree fitting. And I know I've said it in other videos, but I'll say it again. You always want to use your tape on a NPT fitting, but you never want to use them on an AN fitting. I know that seems like common knowledge, but you'd be surprised by how many people I've met that do not know that. So we'll go ahead and just screw this in right here. And there we have it. Our line for our line pressure sensor is going to come out right here on the driver's side. Go underneath the tail housing right there. If we come around to the other side, you can see it wraps around, comes over to our sensor block, and 90s into it. So I'm real happy with that. If you'll notice, I installed that cover plate right there. Super happy with that. It looks really nice. And I also went ahead and installed our dipstick tube and dipstick. So this is a locking dipstick for drag racing, meaning you can't pull this thing out unless this lever's flipped up. So we're good to go there. The only thing is this bracket right here. Like I said, with an LS, you can't thread this into the block like you would on a 350 or something like that. So I have that bracket that bolts to the back of the cylinder head and drops down, and it's supposed to line up here. I have something off a little bit. I'm not exactly sure. It doesn't line up. So I might need to bend this tube a little bit, but it's kind of hard to tell without having the engine bolted up to the transmission. So I need to go ahead and pull the engine off the stand, line everything up, and figure out what I need to do to make that bracket work. I should have that bolt holding it kind of in place for now, so we're going to call that good for here. But that should be everything. The one other thing I did that I didn't film is I went ahead and installed the correct little shifter piece right here. So this is the one that goes with our operator shifter. We're going to mount it in hole A, I believe. So if you see, we have A, B, C, and D. That's for different types of transmissions. I believe the Turbo 400 is hole A. I'll have to look to be sure. So that's good. Ready to mount the shifter whenever we get it in the car. Alright, and there we have it. Super happy with how this thing came out. I think it looks great. I think everything went together very nicely. Hopefully we built this thing to be able to withstand some horsepower. Hopefully it'll see that horsepower. But just super pleased with it. So I think we're going to go ahead and end this video here. We might go ahead and do a part 5 on this thing. Getting it installed, getting the cooler line, shifter, maybe a little bit of wiring, all that good stuff hooked up to it. Also, still waiting on the converter, so maybe we'll throw the converter install into that video as well. But, like I said, just super happy with it. We're going to go ahead and end the video here. Like always, appreciate you guys watching. Go ahead and like, subscribe, comment, anything like that if you feel like it. And we'll catch you guys on the next video.